Okay, it's 8:30. We're going to get the meeting started. My name is Nick. I'm an alcoholic. Just a reminder, food and fellowship starts at 8 o'clock. If you want to get involved with this group, show up early. Great way to help out and to stay sober. This group has a sister meeting. It's the 7:30 Big Book meeting at Salem UCC Church right up the street every Thursday night. We slowly go through the book line by line, sentence by sentence. Be lucky if we get through a paragraph. But it's an excellent way to get in touch with the book and get in touch with others. So come join us there if you'd like to. Find out information about that, come see me after the meeting. What else we have here? We have a Facebook page, Conscious Contact Speaker Group. We have a Doylestown recovery group also, and a YouTube page. You can find all of our speakers, past and present, and a great way also to share that with people and stay sober. Just a reminder, there's no smoking on church property. And let's see, I believe Kara's going to come up and chair the meeting. So let's have a great night. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kara. I'm an alcoholic. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody had a really blessed and healthy Thanksgiving, and we're really glad that you're here tonight. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, PA. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God, reliance, and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new from out of town that would like to introduce themselves? Please raise your hand and introduce yourself.
My name is Ken. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Hey, Ken, welcome.
My name is Mark. I'm an addict.
Welcome. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise their hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purpose of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CDs in the back of the room. Now I would like Sherry to come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Sherry, I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Sherry. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. I've asked Michelle to come up and read the AA 12 Steps of Recovery.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and I'm an alcoholic. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
The 7th tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. The group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big book, CDs, events, and workshops, etc. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, I'd like to introduce a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. I'd like to introduce Cecily from Massachusetts.
I am Cecily, and I am an alcoholic. And I'm going to say something new tonight in my introduction. Through AA, through God, and through good sponsorship, I've been sober since April 17, 2009. It's such a gift. It's such an incredible gift. And the reason my sponsor said, this is kind of how we roll in this sponsorship family, and I'm new to this sponsorship family. I'm not new to my sponsor. She's known me for the 12 years I've been in these rooms. But what is very clear to me as I'm in a step 1 again right now, that it is AA, God, and good sponsorship that keeps me here. And I also have gotten to a point in my sobriety that I want to be here. When I came in, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted. Something brought me here. It was an energy. It was something. It was a memory. I don't really know what got me into these rooms, but I stayed. And I'm grateful for that, because now I really want to hold on to my seat. And I've had lots of opportunities to learn how to. And I've done that well, and I've also clung to my seat in dry drunk stages, and that's not as fun. But to step back for a second, my first taste of alcohol was at age 9. It was Maloney. My father used to bring those little nips home from traveling, and so we had a shelf of these, colorful little nips, my brother and I knew at age 9 that I was being sneaky. Right, that going and trying a nip was not something I was supposed to do, and I was very, very excited. And the adrenaline that I got from that sneaky little moment of picking up that green syrupy stuff was fabulous. And, I remember that. And some people remember their first drink, some don't, but I do. I remember it. And then it took a few years before I was able to figure out how to access the type of drinking that I wanted to do, that my body was asking for. I was age 12, and my mother finally let my sister and my sister's older. I'm the middle child, Marsha, right? Like, I definitely had the I'm lesser than, and I need to, aspire to be, and she was my higher power. And then we had a younger brother. And that was where the family started out. Those are my 2 natural siblings. And my mom was a single mom at the time. And she finally let my sister and I babysit my brother, and we were allowed to bring our best friends over. Well, my best friend, Holly, her parents made moonshine, and she went to the public school. We were currently at the all-girls private school because of this odd situation where my mother was a single mom. We didn't have enough money to afford the uniforms to go there, but my great-great-uncle had bought the land. So there we were in Villanova attending an all-girls school, and I hated it. And I loved Holly. I loved Holly because of her moonshine. I loved Holly because she snuck out with me. I loved Holly because she got us, carpooled to places where we could sneak off and drink and do things. And we got this moonshine. Holly brought it over. My sister, her bestie, myself, and I went into my bedroom, and we mixed that moonshine with Tang, which is meant for astronauts. So it did rocket us to the moon quite quickly. And that night was like a really good example of what alcoholism looks like for me. So we were supposed to babysit my brother. And instead we were up in my bedroom. Now my bedroom, I'm a visual artist, and I continue to be actually today, professionally. But at the time I had done a collage all over my ceiling and walls, and it was really beautifully done. I mean, it was a lot of love and attention that went into that. Pictures out of like Vogue that my great-grandmother got me so I could rebel and, look through these crazy magazines at age 12 that my mother didn't want me looking at. And there was typography and posters of like Duran Duran and Billy Idol and Heart and Cher and, but it was everywhere, and it was what I loved, and it was my little nest, and it was where I went to hide away. And that night we got wasted quickly. We started to hallucinate, and we took out water guns. And within probably an hour to 2 hours, we had taken those water pistols and sprayed all the posters off the walls. And that's kind of what alcohol looked like for me in alcoholism, which was, it would take me months to rebuild or to build for the first time. And in one quick tornado, I could wipe out any of the good, any of the beauty, any of the joy in my life. And that is what alcoholism continues to look like for me today. Although I put the alcohol down a long time ago. And so that night, I destroyed my bedroom. I destroyed my artwork. I destroyed my sense of spirit, and what that was for me. I made my sister lie on my behalf, said that I, had a fever. So I manipulated my sister into lying to my mother. And I neglected my brother. And my brother was left alone with his G.I. Joes downstairs. And those G.I. Joes become a pretty important part of my story this past year. But that's what I did when I drank. And it looked better at times. For a period, I was able to manage that drinking. I was always scared of it. It also happened that I had been going to Alateen from age 10 to 12. And that night is correlated to when I walked out of Alateen and I began to rebel against my mother. I don't really remember exactly what got me so pissed off at my mom, whether it was that she was a single mom and poor in front of all the rich girls, whether it was that she was too strict, whether it was that she had cancer and was taking care of 3 kids, whether it was that she wasn't picking me up on time, but I certainly had some opinions about my mom that were pretty negative. And life went on, and I kept sneaking out, and that was a joy. I loved the adrenaline rush. I just loved it. I loved the recklessness. I loved rebelling. My other best friend was the daughter of the head of the mafia in Philadelphia, and I loved scaring my parents with that information. And, that wasn't new. That was going on since I was a child. I mean, we were born in New York, in Westchester, New York, just north of Manhattan. We moved to Southern California, made quite a few geographics. And in California, I was in kindergarten, and the fantasies that I would create, and I would just go hide in the sandbox. And I think that was really my first addiction, was just going and living in my head, conversations in my own brain, isolated from the world. And that's where I felt best. And, it continued. from there, right? It continued from being a fantasy world in my sandbox to being a fantasy world in real life. Like I'd go out and I'd sort of disconnect for myself from the world I was in by imagining like what I could do when I was, 20 years older, when those bullies, those girls that were wealthy and we weren't, when they were bullying me. Or because, the other thing, they bullied me because I was poor, but also because I wanted to be Pat Benatar and they all wanted to be cotillion dancers, right? So I was definitely, that was another piece of I was just weird. Like I was a weird kid, like I wanted to have a mohawk with like bright yellow hair, and all the other girls in my class wanted to wear Laura Ashley floral dresses, and like I just couldn't get in the game with them. And I was okay with that, but it was just such an extreme, right? And slowly with that extreme came judgment, right? Like I am better than you or I am less than you, but I'm never equal to you. And that's what childhood was, separation, isolation, using different ways of getting into trouble to use adrenaline to avoid feeling my emotions. I was completely and continue to be completely allergic to my emotions. I do not like them. And alcohol slowly found its way into my life. So slowly, I mean, age 12, I drank to blackout. Oh, I destroyed my bathroom that night too, that my mother had built for my sister and I. I blacked out that night. I couldn't get alcohol. I was happy with sneaking out and smoking. But then Mom got remarried to a man in New York City. So my freshman year in high school was in New York City. And that was a game changer, because then I could really sneak out. So I was sneaking out to Alphabet City. I'm not quite sure how I'm still alive. I'm not quite sure how I wasn't hurt more severely. That's what that looks like. I was running away now. I was starting to run away. I was at a private school because the man that my mother married was taking care of us, and suddenly we had a normal life. And by the way, let me tell you, I would go back to Philadelphia, to Villanova, and I would shove it. I would try and shove it into those girls' faces, my couture clothing, and my this and my that, right? Because I'm going to show you that I am so much better than all of you. And that became the aspiration for life. I'm better than you. I'm different than you. You will always, always be lesser than me. And if I can't make you lesser than me, quietly, cordially, right? Because I'd always keep a nice smile on my face. I was just the S, right? I was just dirt on the ground. There was never any kind of sense of meeting people where they were at, that we both shared same amount of space in the room. So New York City was, other types of things started to come into my purview, but alcohol was always the predominant one for me. I then got scared of New York City within the year, and I was scared of running away, and I was scared of the trouble I was getting into. So my dad and his wife said, well, if you keep running away, we'll take you in Boston. And the reason I chose Boston was because I thought that my dad and his wife would probably give me more room to have freedom. Now, what I didn't understand, I was saying at the time, I want to go and drink. I want to protect my right to drink at all costs. I protected my right to drink at that age at the expense of developing characteristics that we now call character defects. I developed those perhaps in order to protect my right to drink, right? And I don't really know. There were some that I was born with, some that developed, chicken or the egg first. They're definitely stuff that's in me today. But I hated my mom. I hated her. She could do no right. And she was a wicked woman who wouldn't let me go live with my dad. And really what my mom was doing when she threw the Bibles on my bed one day, desperate, please come home, sweetie, please come home. She was trying to protect me from what she knew wasn't going to be a very healthy situation for me. And she was right. I moved in with my dad. It wasn't a great situation. His wife wasn't particularly psyched that I was living with them. So I made sure to let her know who had the upper hand by wreaking havoc in their life. And I started running away from them. And I started finding reasons why I needed to run away from them and wreak havoc. And I made quite a name for myself in that high school too, right? She was a runaway. She was always getting in trouble. She was the kid who had the pity, right? She was the kid that was going through a custody trial. Hush, hush, right? She is the abusive parent. Hush, hush. So what did that mean? I would go to the head of the school and say, I really need to take the day off. I'm really having a tough time with my parents. I'd get out of school. I was such a manipulative kid. I was triangulating the school against my dad, and he and his wife figured out that I was doing that. So they actually became a team. But I was using my mom, and I was just getting into more and more trouble. And somehow I was getting through high school, and I don't really know how that happened. But I did, and then I took a year off. And my idea of a year off before going to college was working at a bar, an Irish pub in Boston with blacked out windows, bartending. And, I was cocktail waitressing at first, and with Irish Mafia. And in Boston, that's kind of a real thing. So there I was, 17, 18 years old, working in a blacked out pub and working on what's called Newbury Street, which is the fashion. And so it was like literally by day, I was trying to be this aspiring fashionista. And I think that actually is a part of the God within me. I actually do think I'm a creative soul. And I think that is God aligned. And I think that is that piece of us that we always have within us. That's a piece of me. Like, God's always been there for me. And inside me, right? And it's how I connect with all of you in a healthy, good way. But that nighttime stuff, right? I need more money. I'm going to hang out and start doing cocaine because, if I can't get enough booze, I'll have my backup stuff. Like, I consider myself predominantly an alcoholic because everything else I could pretty much quit, right? So that year ended, and that year ended with a pretty rough relationship at the tail end, and then I was dating some other guy who I blew off when I went to college, and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. Oh, and there was some other guy that I met a few years later and fell into bed with him in my 20s, and so I claimed he was my fiance, and then got too drunk and, to keep that relationship going. That's kind of, I'd fall into things, right? I never really was making decisions. I'd fall into something, and then I would try and sort of like justify it retroactively. And anyways, I got to college, and it was a writing school. And I quickly started having panic attacks, and so my aspirations to become an actress, a famous actress, so that all of you can be beneath me, right? And I can be on top of the hill looking down on all of you. I couldn't act. My dad also went into a coma as a result of needing a liver transplant, which he did get. And so there was my dad. He had blood clots and he had a liver transplant in 93. He was given 2 years to live. So then all of a sudden I wanted to be the good daughter that I had never been, right? And I was also like trying out all sorts of drugs. So I couldn't really figure out my identity. My identity was being taken from me, right? I was doing drugs in college. I was sometimes dry. Oh, I claimed I was dry and I claimed I was sober for 3 years until I looked back at those years and realized that I was on this stuff called Mach 1, which I guess is like a Chinese speed or something. And I was borrowing my roommate's Ritalin. So that's how I'm able to get off of alcohol by the time I hit college. Like, yeah, I was looking really good. And then my senior year, I was in Italy. And all of a sudden, in Italy, you drink wine at lunch. And so booze was back. And fast forward 2 years, I was hospitalized for an overdose because I was on thousands of, I have no idea how many drugs I was on, by some psychiatrist who was helping me quit smoking. And then, gradually things got worse, right? So then I quit my job, and then finally I moved in with my godfather and his partner. And my godfather was a special man, and he also was a heavy-duty drinker. And I took major pride in the fact that I could hang out with 6'7" Viking gay men and drink them under the table. And that was my life, for years. My godfather he just died 2 years ago, and his birthday was yesterday. And I love that man. And he was a wonderful, 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 sweet, loving alcoholic who was really sick and suffering. He had grown up in a family. His father had saved 40 Jewish individuals during the war. His father was assassinated. He taught me about the UN. He taught me about peace. He taught me about overcoming hate. He taught me about gay men's health crisis. I met a man in gay men's health crisis. They would come over, the gentlemen at gay men's health crisis would come over and they would bartend Yopi's parties at the house that he let me come and live at with him. And I had 2 dogs and I was too drunk one night. And there was a gentleman from gay men's health crisis who came over and he took my little pit bull and my little golden retriever for a walk. And they walked with him. They never walked away from me. I mean, those 2 dogs were even worried about leaving me alone, right? I mean, it was really it was sort of remarkable that so this gentleman comes in. I said, can we hire you as a dog walker? Because now I can't even walk my dogs. I'm getting drunk. From 99 to 2009, I did not breathe one sober night. I never, ever had a dry night, with the exception of a yoga camp for a week, which didn't work out so well. But I got almost kicked off of yoga camp, but because I met the other alcoholic there. But Carlos was his name, and Carlos would come by and walk the dogs. Anyways, fast forward, I'd come home at night drunk every night to Yopi's house, and his partner and he would be downstairs drinking their beer and having their friends over, and I'd go upstairs and every once in a while I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd hear movement and rustling, and the dogs would go back to bed, so I knew it wasn't an intruder. And then one day I went to my storage closet in the house and I opened the door and there was a mattress on the floor. And I realized Carlos was homeless and he was sleeping in our closet. And I went down to Yopi, who never leaves anyone behind because of what he had grown up with his father. I said, Yopi, Johannes was his name. I said, Yopi, Carlos is homeless and he's living in our closet. And Yopi said, oh God, we can't actually have another person come live here because it's illegal. We're in a rent-controlled apartment in New York City. But, Yopi said, we can have a butler. So Carlos moves in. Carlos is a victim of his own addictions, meth. So I, now the good alcoholic, working at NBC, working an 80-hour job week, I now help Carlos get off of his meth, right, while I'm drinking beer. So I'm helping this gentleman detox on the bed while drinking beer and asking him to walk my dogs, because I can't be of service without getting something in return. So I'm being of service to this gentleman, Carlos, because he's going to walk my dogs. That was a couple years before he approached me and he said, I love you. You have saved my life. I need you to stop drinking. And he flew in a police officer and his husband, who is an AIDS specialist from Las Vegas, to do an intervention on me. And I sat cordially and I listened to those 2 men who were sober spread the message of AA. And I drank an entire party-sized bottle of wine that night. But I knew the gig was up, and that was 2007. And Carlos continued to be a good Al-Anon-er and would come by and make me breakfast on the weekends. And I had now moved out of my godfather's apartment around the corner to a little studio apartment. And Carlos would come and he would clean up that little apartment. He'd make sure the dogs were walked, and he was just a really good Al-Anon-er in my life. And then finally he had enough. And he said, I need you to quit. I need you to quit. And I said, if you had my life, you wouldn't be able to quit. I mean, my mother had cancer for a second time. My dad was back in the hospital for the liver transplant. I was working an 80-hour-week job in New York City. I was living in a 450 square foot apartment in New York City. I mean, if you had my life, you'd drink too. My 2 dogs had hip dysplasia. I mean, you better feel sorry for me right about now, right? I need your pity. And I would sit there and I'd invite people over to my apartment, my 450 square foot apartment, and I would explain to them while drinking into oblivion why I needed to drink so much. And that's what it looked like for 2 years, while Carlos desperately asked me to quit, because he was insane. He was an Al-Anon-er. right? He was insane. He was like, if I just loved this girl who saved my life enough, who bought me a computer so I can go back and get my high school degree, because he was a refugee from Salvador, and I had helped him get his green card, right? We had helped him get back. He, by the way, is now married to this fabulous young man who's from Greenwich, Connecticut. They live in LA. He's this hairstylist to the stars, and he's been sober, and they just have a beautiful life. But, at the time he was struggling to get back on his feet, and finally he called me a fat, drunk cow. And he said, that's all you are. You're nothing more to me anymore. And it was about a week later that I quit my job at NBC, and I told myself, I walked into NBC, and my boss, I had written a paragraph. I was a writer and producer, and I'd written a paragraph. It had taken me from 11 a.m. when I decided to show up at work that day to about 5 p.m. to write a paragraph on Walden Pond. And the next morning, my boss approached me and said, what is this? And there was grammar markups all over this one paragraph. And I was realizing that I was in DTs. And I couldn't have told you I was in DTs, but I knew there was a problem. It had been about since 2007 that I was waking up in cold sweats every morning. I quit my job that day. I took out my savings and I moved myself to Boston because there was a perfect excuse to get to Boston. Another way to lie, another way to manipulate. I told everyone my dad's dying, and my mom has another bout of cancer, and the dogs have hip dysplasia, and I needed a year off. And what I didn't tell anyone was, what I was really thinking was, I'll just go to that stupid town, Boston, where I went to high school for 3 years. I'll get this drinking thing under control, and I'll get back to New York City, and everything will be A-okay. And by the way, I'll use my savings that my grandfather left me for an education to go become a famous filmmaker. So that's what I did. I destroyed everything. Work had offered to give me 3 months off, right? A paid leave. I didn't take it. Because how dare you think about firing me? I will walk out on you, right? Because I'm a belligerent, terrified, stubborn alcoholic. And if you stand in the way of my drinking, you will leave, not the drinking. And so I moved myself to Boston. Now I'm an alcoholic without the little miniature God, right? Alcohol is my God. Now I don't have the miniature God of work. That was like I was like a polytheistic, right? I had like big God, alcohol, and then I had workaholism, socializing-ism, right? Know-it-all-ism, like I had lots of other little gods. Perfectionism, eating-isms. I'm definitely one of the sick and suffering ones in these rooms when I got in here, and I still am growing. Ask my sponsors, you got to talk to me today. But I got to Boston in 6 months. I had gone to Brazil. I have a history with Brazil. First time to Brazil, I went to become a famous filmmaker, and I got kidnapped. Second time, I went to Brazil to become a famous filmmaker, and I ended up in the ICU. The third time, I went to become a famous filmmaker, and I was dry, and I was completely crazy. And I don't use that word lightly. I was completely crazy. And I was living with a family who was religious, and I thought that they were going to save me. I thought becoming a famous filmmaker was going to save me. It didn't work out that way. I got back from Brazil after having some dry stints and had a blackout drunk in New York City the night I arrived back. I got myself up to Boston. This is 6 months after I had moved out of New York City. And the gig was up. But now I found out that because I hadn't taken care of myself, I had to have surgery. And it was like a cut me open surgery. Otherwise, I was going to rupture things and bleed internally. And so I was with a guy at the time. He was as sick as I was. He asked me what I needed the night before that surgery. I said, yeah, I'm allowed to have a glass of wine. That is not what you're allowed to do when you're getting put under general anesthesia, by the way. I had one glass of wine, and that was my meek little attempt to manage my life before the next day. While I was drinking that glass of wine, I thought, thank God I'm going into the hospital because I'll be safe from myself for a few days and I can just get my act together. And then the thought came to me, I want to cut myself open. I want someone else to cut me open in order to save myself from me. It's really, really wrong. And that's how sick I was. And so that first day in the hospital, I count as my first day sober because I had a desire to stop drinking. And, the few days before that, it was like April 13th was my mom's birthday. April 14th was my birthday. It was a pretty lonely year. April 15th was tax day. Don't think I remember that very much. April 16th was the day I went in for surgery. And April 17th, I was in a hospital, and I was grateful to be safe from myself. And 3 days later, I was let out of the hospital, and I had this budget. I was like, I'm going to quit drinking, and I'm going to be on this budget, and I'm going to get my life together, and I'm going to get back to New York because I'm in this dumb city, Boston, which is not a cool enough place for me to be because I have to be better than all those girls that bullied me in high school. I had to plan, right? And I'm really good at making plans for the future. So I lasted 20 days with that plan. And the cigarettes came back, and then the mental obsession / craving came back because I was about 20 or 22 days at this point without alcohol. And I realized, okay, if I order the booze to the house, I have to spend $75, and that wasn't in my budget. If I walked to the corner, because I had very conveniently gotten myself an apartment that was a block away from a liquor store. If I walk myself to that corner, I can't carry the booze home that I need. It's too much booze, and I'll rupture the stitches. And I walked to AA. And in that meeting, I had my first amend that night. I walked into Massachusetts General Hospital, and I asked where the AA meeting was, and the information booth told me, and I couldn't hear him. And so I ran around because, I'm an addictive personality that needs a lot of help. I'm really needing help. Doesn't everyone know that, right? Because I just walked 2 miles and I'm on serious recovery mode on this surgery. And so I run back to the information booth and I'm screaming at him. I just need to get to the AA meeting. I'm late. So that was my first amendment that my sponsor and I dealt with. But I did get to the meeting that night. And in that meeting was an 18-year-old woman. I was 35. I had been alive for 35 years. She was 18 and 3 months sober. And there was a woman from Brazil who was like double digits. I'm like, God just has such a sweetness. I didn't need to go to Brazil. I didn't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to fix me. The answer was right around the corner. And there she was, standing beautiful, smiling. And I told her to go F herself because she was way too happy. But the 18-year-old with 3 months who was like this God thing, I don't know if I got that, but I'm sober and I'm working on it, I could hear her. And she also felt like a big sister because I'd been drinking since I was 12 and smoking and using adrenaline and using fantasy and all these things. Like, she felt like a big sister to me, and emotionally, I think she was. And we walked for about 2 hours that night. And it was like a spring night in Boston, and Boston's actually a pretty town. It's a very pretty town, and these cherry blossoms were out everywhere, and it was fragrant. And we sat at the Boston Public Library, and I could feel the breeze. I could actually feel the breeze, and I could see around me. And that night I went from being an addictive personality to a safe... I think I had diagnosed myself with like agoraphobia. I think that's what I like to pretend I'm a doctor sometimes, and I go into WebMD and I diagnose myself. And at the time I had diagnosed myself as an agoraphobic. And then I wasn't. I was just an alcoholic. And I begged that 18-year-old who's still sober today and lives in San Francisco, and she's really cool. I begged her to take me to a meeting the next day. And she did, 12 p.m., which was my morning. She took me to a meeting, and then I begged her to take me to another one. And she said, okay, And then an hour later she called and she said, I'm sorry, I can't take you to the next meeting. You have to go alone and take responsibility for your alcoholism. My sponsor told me to say that to you. That was my second resentment in AA. And he's a great guy. He's also an artist and he's still sober today, our sponsor. Anyways, I went to that meeting and there was a woman looked a little like me, talking. And I sat in the back. And I still was struggling with being on time. I sat in the back. There was no one around me, so I was like, okay, I've got this. And remember, 6 months prior to this, I was the highest paid producer writer at NBC in the division that I was working in. I had potential. I am an alcoholic, and most of us do. That night, there was an intermission in between 45 minutes, 15-minute intermission. They do that in Boston sometimes. That 15-minute intermission, I was so terrified of all of you, I went and I hid in the broom closet. And literally like an ostrich, I thought, sticking my head in the sand, I would just disappear and none of you would see me. My fear was so raw and so powerful that night. And when I came out of that closet, there was a woman sitting next to the chair that I had found. And she had her arm around my chair. And I was too tired to fight you. I was too tired to fight the love. I loved fighting love because it meant that you'd have a reason to drink. If no one loves you, you have a reason to drink. Right? So I was really good at fighting people's love. And really good at judging how it looked. Like my mom, my dad, his wife, my sister, my brother. I had a whole lot. Yobi, he didn't love me enough. Carlos definitely didn't love me enough. You know, that guy that was trying to get me sober. Like none of these people loved me enough. But I didn't fight Shelley's love. And at the end of the meeting, Shelley and a couple of other women surrounded me. And Shelley, beautifully dressed, Bostonian woman, said, you never have to drink again, and you never have to be alone again. And I said, God, she's actually well dressed. There's someone normal in Boston. She'll be my sponsor. It so happened that she also knew the big book really well, and that's what God found for me that night, because I couldn't do it. You know, I couldn't carry myself. I was so empty and broken. And another one of those women took me to another meeting that night. It was the third one. And it was on the 4th step. So I knew right out of the gates what I was getting myself into. And I was ready. And I was broken. And I was ready. And I dove into the steps. And then all of a sudden, I started getting healthy. And all of a sudden, that piece of me that's always going to be better than all of you came back. And I was like disco AA girl. I was like, I am going to do this better than all of you. So, you know, thank God for the character defect. Because it got me sober. It got me healthy. And I started having the effects of spiritual experiences along the way to these 12 steps. I started having an experience and another one and another one. And the 5th step, I did the 5th step and it was snowing. And I walked home, and I was light like a snowflake. You know, I was just light, and it was okay. And the next day, I was walking down the street. Boston's a small town; everyone knows each other. And there was an AA, and he said, "What happened to you? You look different." I said, "I just did my 5th step." He said, "You were lighter than I've ever seen." I still know that man too, and he's still sober. And I loved the steps. And I was a disco girl in AA. And I was annoying. I was very annoying. And I was ready to do it all better than all of you. And because I was so annoying, other people were taking it to their sponsors and saying, I have this resentment against this annoying girl in AA. And their sponsors were saying, why don't you try the steps and see if you get the same results? And there were these litter mates all of a sudden. And there was this posse of people that were getting sober. And God put me there to be annoying, you know? And like, I got to be that person. And I thought I was really well loved, but all of those people were practicing the beginning of their journey of patience and tolerance. And it worked because we care about each other today. And I know where a lot of those people are. I also know the ones that have died because they stopped. And I will tell you, everyone I know who has died, who I've met in AA, they have the same story, which is that they stopped going to their sponsor and they stopped doing the steps. That is my experience. So if it's different than yours, hats off. That is my experience. And so I don't stop the steps, although I've had a dry spell because I've tried to rest in my laurels. But I started doing the steps over and over and over again. And then I met a boy at 2.5 years of sobriety. And that boy was really fun to put into like the God, right? I was like, relationship, right? Everyone in Boston's getting married. I should get married. So this guy, at a month of sobriety, hadn't done the steps himself. Like, whatever. Like, I'm going to marry this guy. That was not what God had intended. And, we were both learning and growing, and it was not the right relationship for me, and I had to break it off with him, otherwise I was going to drink. And he was going to all my meetings, right? And he was dating my former sponsor's new sponsee, right? So it's all about me, by the way. He's doing this to me. Okay, they're, by the way, still married. But this is happening to me. And you're going to my meetings and you're dangerous and you're a horrible person and you're going to ruin me. And so I dove into the steps again. And I dove into service, and I became the GSR of my home group. And I also started to have a life that was bridged outside of AA. And that sort of was because I got pushed a little bit out of the nest in all the right ways, kind of a God way. Not like I'm going to go make a career for myself and become famous and fabulous and better than all of you, but God suddenly was putting things in front of me, right? Opportunities were arising where I was starting to practice the principles of AA in the world outside. And so my little sandbox of AA, which was a reality sandbox, not my fantasy sandbox, started teaching me how to use these principles, how to use the 12 steps, how to use the 12 traditions, how to use the 12 concepts, which are kind of cool, and I still don't really know a lot about them, but they are cool, and they are sort of like Jedi AA stuff. But I love them, and I've got to do service in AA. I've been able to travel to different countries and go to AA meetings in Mongolia. We tried to get to one in Ghana, but the roads were too broken, so I got to speak to Ghanaian AAs. I have been to a bunch of states. I have had some really wonderful adventures. And AA has always been so much more fascinating than the bar at the end of that plane ride. Like AA, we are definitely not a hotbed of mental health, but we are a fascinating group. We are very interesting, and I love it. I really love it. I mean, we're much more interesting dry and sober than we are drunk. So I would take a group of unhealthy drunks over a group of drunk drunks any day of the week. And but truly, I have found beautifully sober human beings in so many stretches of the world. And I was in Mongolia. They were having the Asian Oceanic Service Assembly meeting. So there were 200 Mongolians that came from all the different states in Mongolia to witness our international delegates speak about how United States and Hong Kong were going to sponsor Mongolia and India and Thailand, So countries sponsor countries. It's kind of cool. We're kind of a part of an amazing fellowship. I mean, just go to one of our international conferences the next time we can go. They're fun. You get to hear people sing Amazing Grace, 60,000 people. It's extraordinary. And I've been able to carry this stuff into my life. I will tell you, at one point I stopped doing the steps. I was sponsoring women. I was going to meetings. I was going to service meetings. and I was stuck in a 6-step. I got involved in an abusive relationship in sobriety. And when I say abusive, it was mutually abusive. It was rage that I picked up. I did not know that that was inside me. I was a good little waspy girl that kind of wanted to be Pat Benatar, like the good waspy girl with an edge. You know, I did not know I had rage. And I have had to make amends. And that has been extremely, extremely rewarding. I have made amends to police officers. I've had to go back to them and apologize for calling them when Carlos brought his friends over after walking my dogs, and I didn't want his friends, and I was too drunk to figure out how to kick them out of the house. So I called 911 on him. You know, I had to make amends for lying about my identity, for carrying an open beer can in public. I've had to go back and pay back stores. At one point I had to pay back a store that my friend stole from for me because I had manipulated my friend into stealing from me. I went back and I paid that store back. And when I told them that I was doing that particular amend, I was told to say, I'm doing this to stay sober. I owe you this money. The wife of the store owner brought the owner out from back and asked me to repeat what I had just said in my amend. And the two of them wept because they had lost 3 siblings to alcoholism and had never spoken about it to anyone. Because we create such pain for our family members and the shame that they have to have, because so few people understand this. I gave them an opportunity to cry, and they gave me an opportunity to take responsibility for my alcoholism. I don't need them to destigmatize me. I don't need them to understand me. I don't need them to say happy birthday when I get another year. I need to be okay with God. And I have a sponsor today who really helps me with that and has been a part of my journey for a long time. So quickly, this year, let's start 2020. March 11, 2020, I am a filmmaker still. I was supposed to be working on a project for a really cool network, and it was going to be a big documentary series. And I've gone back to school in sobriety. A sober person took me out. They're not supposed to debate, but he debated me, and he won the debate, and I applied and went back to school. And so I was also working as an academic because I had been awarded a fellowship afterwards. And this is not something I ever thought I wanted, needed. I mean, I'm dyslexic and I'm a drunk, and here I am in academia teaching people who are extraordinary and giving to their communities and incredible human beings, and I'm just awed by how much I've learned by the students I've had the chance to teach. Anyways, I was trying to start a media studies center at the university that I was at, and I was trying to work in New York City, and that was March 11th and March 12th. And I have this new fiance, right? I have a fiance now. Oh my God, poor guy. And, you know, we've been together for 4 years, and we haven't been able to get married because Mom had cancer, and that took precedent. And then we had COVID, and then some other tragedies happened. And, but we're together. That's fine. You know, God will do it. We'll have a wedding one of these days. And a beautiful thing happened in Bermuda, which was sort of God's way of saying you two get to be together. But, so this stuff is going on, and, you know, March 12th, we realized we're going to have to shut down our office in New York City. The university was like, sorry, no go. We can't do fundraising for a brand new project right now. We got some major crises to work out. And the Showtime project, the television series project, shut down because it was too dangerous to be out interviewing people. So my industry had shut down. So I called my brother, the one I neglected. I said, can I have an informational interview at your company about corporate social responsibility? That sounded good. I mean, I really didn't know what I was going to do, but I needed health benefits. And, like, you know, as like corporate social responsibility, I think that's like the good guy thing to do. So I just said, you know, can I have an informational interview? That led to the job I have, which is on Human Insights, and I'm responsible right now for working with a group of people to come up with solutions to make the workplace better, and then to like track it with film, like to do case studies on how to make the workplace better for employees because we're going through a really hard time, and work is a big part of all of our lives. And I get to practice a little bit of AA at work. A little bit of like kumbaya, principles over personalities. I work with people of different political affiliations, different religious affiliations, different gender realities, all that cool stuff. We're a little small group, and I love it. And I love that AA is teaching me, and I love that I get to teach other people. So I started a new career, and got through Christmas. Last year was tough on me. I was having some medical issues right as this new job came. One day at a time I got through it. The medical issues, the new job, the new stressors. No friend, no foe exists in my God-aligned world. Only teachers. And when I can remember that and bring myself to that reality, everyone is truly beautiful. And everyone is a true opportunity for learning. And I get to be kind and gentle and loving to them in spite of the temper tantrum happening in my brain. That was all going on. And then in January, my brother and his wife had their second baby. And this is sad. So a week later, his wife passed away. And suddenly my brother, top sales guy at his company, was with an infant and a 5-year-old kiddo who hadn't been with pretty much anyone other than his mother through all of COVID. And then about a month later, we found out why my mom has been acting so odd for 8 years. She has this neurodegenerative disease that she's not very comfortable acknowledging in any way, shape, or form. In fact, she fights more than I do when I was a drunk. But it's a neurodegenerative disease that has a pretty tough prognosis. And I'm on the ground with her right now. This is the woman I left in a custody trial. This is the woman I testified against. And, God just has these ways of creating such gifts. And I've been there for my brother. God shows me when I'm meant to be. I am learning how to not inflict myself on my brother, to look like I am the altruistic, perfect sister, right? I do not need to be a self-centered, altruistic human being. I need to be of service when it supports him, not to make me feel better because I'm sad for him, right? I need to be there to be of service when it's inconvenient for me or when it's convenient. But when he asks, I ask my God to help me know when I'm being invited into his world. And so for Thanksgiving, he asked to come down with his kids. And my mom was there, and we were able to get somebody to help with my mom. She falls a lot, and she refuses to acknowledge that she's falling, so she's had a lot of black and blues. And God sent us a beautiful angel who claimed to be my housekeeper, and she was a nurse aide, and she just kind of was with us for the day. Just gently hovering, gently sort of aware, gently part of the family, sat with us at dinner, taught us about her country, where she's from. And there was my brother and his son with the G.I. Joes in my house. Because I created a home, and I can be there. And my mother trusts me today. She knows that she can be held by me. This is not me. Who am I? I am self-centered. I am a bee. Today, I decided to I was very uncomfortable today because I'm sad about saying goodbye to my brother. And, he's back in Boston. It's hard. And my mom had a flood in the brand new assisted living apartment. And so I called my sponsor and I'm like, why did you tell me last week that I don't have a foundation in AA? And she was like, really? You're going to make this about me? And I was like, no, it definitely is about you. My sponsor said to me, Cecily, when I call my sponsor, I usually listen. I usually just listen, because I trust my sponsor. And she said, I'm sorry you're struggling to trust me right now. I think you're a little sad. I think you're a little tired. I think you're a little scared. And as soon as she said those words, scared, she just needed to pierce that ego, smash that ego. And then she said, and by the way, don't F up tonight. No. So I hope I didn't, but it's been really nice to be here. It's a gift to surrender myself to AA, to take the drive down, see the beautiful area and the landscape and the world around here. So thank you.
It's customary for us to form a line, thank our speakers formally. They come here at their own time and expense. Let's thank Cecily one more time. Great. Don't forget the meeting after the meeting. Hang out with us a bit. We're going to throw these chairs up on that rack. That's the important part, the meeting before the meeting after the meeting. And we got a nice way of closing. If you guys care to join us, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Take a short moment. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. That's a wrap. Very good.